Hello and welcome, and I'm very happy you're here tonight. Before we begin our long and peaceful journey through the story of the Visigoths, I want you to take a slow, deep breath and allow your shoulders to soften. Tonight, we're going to travel through quiet forests, fading Roman frontiers, and the early world of the Gothic peoples, all told gently, slowly, and calmly, so that you can relax deeply and drift into sleep whenever your mind is ready. And if you enjoy these peaceful history journeys, if they help you rest, study, or simply feel calmer, I would be truly happy if you subscribe to the channel. Your support means so much, and it helps me create more soothing historical stories for you. Thank you, truly. Now, let's settle in. Let your breathing become quiet and natural. Let your eyes blink heavier and heavier as we begin the soft, quiet story of the Visigoths. The world we're traveling back to is far older than the medieval kingdoms and empires most people remember. It is a world shaped by forests stretching endlessly across northern Europe, by rivers drifting slowly beneath gray skies, by tribes whose lives followed the rhythm of seasons and silence. And among these peoples, one group would begin an extraordinary journey, one that would take them from the cold north to the warm hills of Hispania, where they would build a kingdom that lasted centuries. These were the Visigoths in the beginning. Long before their name was known across Europe, the ancestors of the Visigoths lived quietly along the shores of the Baltic Sea. No grand cities, no palaces, no emperors, only wooden villages surrounded by pine forests, where the wind hummed softly through the branches and the sea, always patient, whispered against the shoreline. Imagine it. A small settlement of wooden huts, smoke rising lightly from fire pits, the scent of pine resin in the air, the ground still damp from last night's rain, children playing quietly near the water, hunters returning from the forest with their bows low and their voices calm, elders sitting beneath a large oak tree, telling stories of ancestors who crossed the frozen lands long before. Life here moved slowly, gently. Each person understood the turning of the seasons, the migration of animals, the way winter's silence could last for months. The people valued memory, tradition, and the wisdom of past generations. Around the fire, they spoke of gods who guarded them, spirits who walked through the trees, and heroes who journeyed beyond the edge of the known world. Among these tribes, a name began to grow. The Goths didn't appear suddenly. Whispered into existence through stories, through migrations, through the quiet weaving together of families and clans. Over generations, this identity strengthened until the Goths began drifting south, following rivers and forests, traveling not out of conquest, but out of slow, steady movement, seeking land, sunlight, and safer winters. As they moved toward the vast Roman frontier, the world around them began to change. Gone were the endless pine forests. Gone were the icy winds of the north. Instead, they found rolling plains, warmer air, and unfamiliar roads built by Roman engineers who had shaped the land with stone and order. For a Gothic traveler seeing this for the first time, it must have felt surreal, like stepping out of a quiet dream into a world where everything was structured, controlled, and vast. Roman forts stood along the frontier like silent giants. Roman soldiers marched with discipline and armor glinting under the sun. Villages bustled with trade, wine, oil, pottery, things the Goths had never needed before. And yet, the Romans looked at the Goths with a strange mixture of fear and curiosity. To Rome, the Goths were barbarians, wild, unpredictable. A people from beyond the misty forests of the north. But the truth was far softer. The early Visigoths lived simply, quietly, guided by tradition rather than ambition. Their encounters with Rome were not the raging storms that later legends would describe. Instead, they were small ripples of curiosity, trading cautious peace and moments of gentle learning between two very different worlds. In time, the Visigoths would grow stronger, wiser, more united. They would face hunger, betrayal, and desperation. They would witness the fall of Rome itself, and eventually, they would build a kingdom in the warm hills of Hispania. A kingdom of stone churches, learned bishops, and quiet strength. But all of that comes later. For now, in this first chapter, we are simply wandering through the early mists of time, where the Visigoths existed softly, almost unseen, preparing for the long, winding journey that destiny had set before them. Let your breath settle, let your thoughts loosen, and whenever you begin to drift, let the story carry you gently. Tonight is only the beginning. As you settle deeper into your pillow, let this next part gently unfold like a slow-moving river. There's no rush, no urgency, just a quiet, steady journey through time. We will continue following the Visigoths as they drift southward, leaving the misty northern forests and stepping gradually toward the vast, complicated world of the Roman Empire. Take another soft breath, loosen your shoulders, let your eyelids feel heavier, and allow the story to carry you gently, peacefully. The world of the Visigoths was beginning to shift in ways their ancestors could never have imagined. For generations, they had lived in small, scattered communities. Wooden houses with thatched roofs, smoke curling up into gray skies, herds of animals grazing under the watch of quiet hunters. Life had a rhythm shaped entirely by nature: harsh winters, short summers, the gathering of food, the telling of stories, the passing of seasons. But slowly, over many years, their world widened. They followed rivers that flowed south, and each step led them into new landscapes. Open fields, warmer breezes, unfamiliar animals, and broader horizons. These migrations weren't quick or dramatic. They were slow, generational movements. Children who began the journey might grow old and never see its end. For the Visigoths, moving south wasn't an event. It was a way of life. By the time they reached the great open plains north of the Danube, they were no longer the same people who had once lived in the shadowy pine forests near the Baltic Sea. Their clothing changed, now woven from new materials traded with other tribes. Their weapons improved: longer spears, stronger shields, metalwork learned from distant neighbors. Their leaders grew more organized, and councils of elders began shaping decisions with greater care, knowing that the choices they made would affect tens of thousands of wandering families. Here, near the Danube River, the Goths split into two main groups with slowly diverging paths. Those who remained closer to the Black Sea became the Ostrogoths, while the Visigoths formed their own identity further west. But for now, in this calm part of our story, they are still simply one great moving people, shaped by wind, forest, and the long arc of migration. When the Visigoths finally reached the river Danube, they gazed across its wide blue surface towards something they had never seen before: the frontier of the Roman Empire. Imagine the scene: quiet morning mist hovering above the water. A few Roman watchtowers in the distance, built of stone. Flags hanging motionless in the early light. And beyond them, far away, the faint outlines of Roman roads stretching like long, straight lines toward the horizon. To a Visigothic warrior, it must have seemed strange. Roads too straight to be natural, forts too large to be built by any tribe they knew, smoke rising from towns filled with people speaking languages they had never heard. Rome existed like a great silent presence, powerful yet mysterious, familiar yet unknowable. But the Romans were not strangers to the Visigoths, not entirely. Traders, brave, curious men, would cross the frontier to exchange furs, amber, and handmade goods for Roman wine, metal tools, and jewelry. These objects, rare and shining, became treasures in Gothic villages. A Roman knife could be an heirloom. A Roman glass cup might be passed through generations. Slowly, respect grew, and fear, and fascination. But Rome, in this period, wasn't the strong, disciplined empire it had once been. It was changing, cracking. The frontiers along the Danube became harder to defend. Governors argued. Generals fought each other. Taxes rose and morale fell. Yet even weakened, Rome still appeared majestic from afar. The Visigoths. Rome was a sleeping giant, still powerful, still dangerous, but no longer invincible. As the Visigoths settled near the Danube, building temporary camps and small wooden settlements, their leaders, known as rakes, began discussing what to do next. They could see Roman patrols across the river. They watched traders carry goods across guarded checkpoints. They listened to the distant clang of Roman blacksmiths inside the forts. Life here was different from the deep north, more structured, more watched, more tense. Yet for many Visigoths, the land around the Roman frontier felt like a place of opportunity. The soil was richer, the climate milder, the game more plentiful, and the Romans, though wary, often preferred trading to fighting. For years, peace held, a fragile, delicate peace. But beneath the calm surface, changes were coming. Meanwhile, Visigothic life along the Danube developed its own rhythm. Families built larger houses, carved from sturdier timber. Hunters became farmers. Councils became more formal. Leaders began thinking not only of survival, but of diplomacy, alliances, and the future of the tribe. Night after night, around glowing campfires, storytellers would speak of how their people had journeyed so far, how the gods had guided them, how the world was changing. These stories weren't loud. They weren't dramatic. They were soft, reflective, and slow, much like the land itself. Sometimes, travelers from the east brought news of other tribes. Sometimes, they brought warnings, and sometimes, they brought whispers of a threat so vast and unstoppable that even the Visigoths felt fear. Far beyond the Gothic world, across endless grasslands and distant mountains, a new force was rising, one that moved like a storm. The people who would later be known as the Huns were beginning to push westward, driving countless tribes before them. No one had seen them yet, but stories traveled faster than armies, and even the quiet Visigothic villages began to murmur of danger on the horizon. For now, though the threat was distant, unseen, easy to ignore, and so life continued calmly. On warm evenings, the Danube shimmered under the sunset, and Gothic children played along the riverbanks. Women gathered herbs from the meadows, drying them for winter. Warriors practiced with their spears, their silhouettes dark against the setting sun. And the Roman frontier remained quiet, its forts standing like patient stone guardians waiting for whatever tomorrow might bring. The Visigoths did not yet know that in time, they would cross this river in desperation. They did not yet know they would face hunger, betrayal, and war, nor that they would one day march into Italy itself and shake the foundations of Rome. But that is still far away. Tonight, in this part of our story, the Visigoths are simply living along the river, unaware of how. History will soon turn toward them. Imagine the gentle sounds of their world, the crackling of evening fires, the soft voices of families preparing meals, the distant howl of wolves from the forests, and the quiet flow of the Danube, steady and eternal. All of it wrapped their lives in a cocoon of ancient calm. Their society, though simple, had deep traditions. Councils of elders made decisions through slow, thoughtful conversations. Warriors swore oaths of loyalty to their leaders. Families held strong bonds, sharing food, stories, and responsibilities. The Goths valued courage, but also memory, respect for the past, for ancestors, for the lessons carried through generations. As the seasons passed, their settlements grew. Wooden fences surrounded their villages. Horses grazed in the sunlight. Fields of barley and wheat rustled under gentle breezes. And for a time, it seemed as though they had found a place to rest. But nothing in their world stayed still for long. Rome's influence grew stronger. Gothic leaders began forming alliances with Roman generals, exchanging soldiers, goods, and promises. Some Visigothic warriors even served in the Roman army, learning Roman tactics, armor making, and discipline. These experiences would shape the future of the Visigoths in ways no one yet understood. Still, peace continued. For now that as night fell over their camps, the Visigoths would gather around fires, listening to their elders tell stories of the distant north and the unknown lands beyond the horizon. These moments were gentle and bonding, weaving the tribe together with memory and tradition. And even though change was coming, even though storms gathered far away, tonight is a quiet night in their history, soft, calm, wrapped in the warm glow of firelight and the steady rhythm of life, so let yourself drift with them. Feel the slow shifting of their world. Feel the calm before history begins to move faster, and allow this story to guide you into deeper relaxation. As you continue settling into comfort, let your breath soften. Let your body grow heavier against the bed. Let your thoughts begin to float gently. Like leaves drifting on a quiet river, I end this part of our peaceful journey. The world of the Visigoths is still calm, but far beyond their horizon, something begins to stir. Something that will change their lives forever. This is the soft, slow moment before history accelerates, a quiet dawn before a storm. For now, the Visigoths still live along the Danube. Their villages are growing. Their herds are healthy. Trade with Rome brings goods they could never craft themselves. Metal pots with smooth surfaces, glass cups that shimmer in the sunlight, fabrics dyed in rich colors. Life feels almost balanced. But the Visigoths have always known the world can shift. Seasons change, rivers rise and fall, alliances bloom and wither. They understand that stability is something the earth offers for only a little while, and indeed, the earth is beginning to tremble beneath distant hooves. But let's not rush, close your eyes, if they aren't already closing on their own, and imagine a soft early morning in a Visigothic settlement. Mist curls above the ground like a thin blanket. Dew clings to the tall grass. A lone horse snorts quietly as the first hints of sunlight paint the sky pale gold. That a woman tends a small fire, gently blowing on the embers. That a child gathers twigs, humming softly. That a warrior sharpens his spear with slow, steady movements. This world is ancient, but peaceful yet in the distance. Across mountains and rivers the Visigoths have never seen, tribes begin to move. Pushed forward by a new people, fierce and fast, riding strong, short horses with unmatched skill. The Huns, but the Visigoths do not know their name yet. All they feel is a strange tension in the air, a whisper traveling from tribe to tribe, stories told by wandering merchants who arrived breathing heavily, glancing constantly over their shoulders. They are coming, some say, fast riders with no fear, warriors who live on their horses. They do not build villages. They do not farm. They only move and conquer. But for the Visigoths, these tales feel distant, like stories of monsters told to frighten children. Surely no one can move so quickly. No people can be so relentless. No threat could sweep across the world like wind through tall grass. And so, life continues quietly. Still, the stories spread. Around campfires at night, elders speak more cautiously. Warriors look toward the east more often. Mothers keep their children closer. Yet the Danube remains calm. The frontier remains quiet. The Romans across the river maintain their watch. Even Rome feels uneasy, though they do not show it. Roman scouts report strange movements far away. Generals write letters filled with concern. Emperors argue over strategies, fearful of what might come. But the empire is weary. Decades of internal conflict, civil wars, economic strain, and shifting loyalties have weakened its once unbreakable armor. Still, Rome stands, and the Visigoths, watching from the north, believe it will stand forever. But the ground beneath their feet is slowly shifting. One evening, as the sun dips low and paints the sky in soft shades of orange, a small group of travelers arrives at a Visigothic village. Their clothes are torn, their faces exhausted. They speak of a distant tribe destroyed overnight, of riders appearing from the horizon like a black wave. The village listens quietly, and no one interrupts. Children stare wide-eyed, warriors frown, gripping their spears tighter. But these warnings feel unreal, impossible. The Visigoths have survived harsh winters, Roman armies, and long migrations. They have crossed dense forests, frozen rivers, and endless plains. Surely they can survive one more challenge. For now, they wait. They watch. They prepare slowly, quietly, cautiously. Life remains peaceful, but a subtle tension hums in the background, like the low vibration of a distant storm. During this time, Visigothic culture grows stronger. Their leaders, known as rakes, hold councils where decisions are made with care, guided by older wisdom and younger ambition. One of the most respected leaders is Fritigern, a thoughtful man, a patient man, a man who listens before he speaks. He sees the signs. He hears the fear in the voices of travelers. He understands the fragile relationship with Rome. But he also feels something deeper, something ancestral, something instinctive. A sense that the Visigoths stand at a crossroads. Behind them is the world they have always known. Forests, rivers, old traditions. Ahead lies an uncertain future, one shaped by new powers rising from the east and old empires crumbling in the south. The Visigoths stand between worlds as days pass. More travelers arrive. Some from the plains, some from small tribes crushed or displaced, some too frightened to describe what they had seen. All speak of the same approaching force, and slowly, very slowly, the Visigoths begin to believe. The elders meet at night under a vast starry sky, their faces lit by soft firelight. They speak in low voices. What if the stories are true? What if they come? What if Rome will not help us? What will happen to our children if we stay here? These questions linger like smoke above the fire. Fritigern listens carefully. He speaks calmly, never raising his voice. He believes that if danger is coming, the Visigoths must unite. Not scatter, not argue, not panic. Over the next months, the tribe grows more organized. Warriors train longer. Villages store more grain. Scouts travel farther east. But the storm remains just a whisper. It has not arrived yet. And so, the Danube flows quietly. The forests sway gently. Children laugh and play. Mothers cook warm meals. Horses breathe softly in the cold morning air. The world feels suspended in time. On certain nights, the northern lights shimmer faintly across the sky, soft ribbons of green and blue drifting above the world. The Visigoths believe these lights are signs from the gods, guiding them, warning them, comforting them. Meanwhile, Rome continues its slow decline. The empire is divided east and west. Generals crave power. Emperors come and go. Troops are exhausted and underpaid. Border towns feel unsafe. Yet the empire still towers above everything, still holds prestige, still possesses roads, fortresses, and armies that dwarf anything the Visigoths have ever known. The Visigoths respect Rome, fear Rome, envy Rome, and soon they will need Rome. But that moment is not here yet. Tonight, as soft winds travel across the Danube and the moon rises above the mountains, the Visigoths gather for a great feast. They roast meat over the fire, share drinks, sing old songs about their ancestors, and tell stories of heroes who crossed frozen seas long before any living person was born. The atmosphere is warm, gentle, communal. These traditions give the Visigoths strength. They remind them of who they are. They preserve identity during times of uncertainty. A grandmother tells a child a story of the first Goth who ever learned to tame a horse. A young man speaks proudly of his first hunt. A group of warriors recite tales of past battles, their voices deep and slow, while the fire crackles softly beside them. In moments like this, the looming danger fades. It becomes nothing more than a rumor carried by the wind. But the wind does not at dawn one morning. A Visigothic scout returns in a hurry. His horse is exhausted, covered in sweat, his eyes wide, his face pale. He has seen something terrifying, something real, that a large group of displaced tribes, Gepids, Typhali, even some Alans, moving westward, not wandering, not migrating, but fleeing. The scout speaks breathlessly. They're running from something fast, something powerful. But still, he does not know the name, and no one does. Not why. As the sun climbs the sky, warriors gather, elders consult the gods through rituals, and Fritigern asks only one question. How long do we have? No one knows, but they can feel the answer inside them. Not long. And so begins the slow, quiet transformation of the Visigoths, from a wandering people living peacefully along the Danube into a unified nation preparing for the most important decision in their history. The decision that will lead them to Rome's gates. The decision that will reshape Europe. The decision that will bring both suffering and salvation. But for tonight, for this peaceful moment, the world is still calm. The river flows. The fires glow, and the Visigoths breathe deeply under the wide, ancient sky. Let yourself drift with them. Step into their world. Feel their anxiety, their hope, their unity, but also their quiet strength. As you settle deeper into your blanket, feel your breathing soften, feel your thoughts drift gently, and allow this next chapter of the Visigoths' long journey to unfold slowly, like a lantern glowing in the dark. In the last part, a quiet tension crept into the world of the Visigoths. Rumors whispered across the plains. Travelers fled past their villages. Scouts returned with warnings. Something was coming from the east, something unstoppable. But the Visigoths still hoped the danger might pass them by. They still hoped life could remain calm a little longer, and yet destiny had already begun to turn. Now, in this part of our story, the storm draws closer, but remember, tonight we continue softly, without rush, without noise. Even when history grows heavy, our journey remains gentle. Let your eyes relax. Let your body grow heavier, and drift with the Visigoths toward the most important decision in their history. The Huns had finally appeared, not as rumors, not as stories, but as a living force, swift. Riders on powerful, compact horses, archers who could fire in full gallop with terrifying precision, warriors who moved like a storm, sudden, overwhelming, impossible to stop. Tribes across the plains collapsed like fragile branches under a heavy snowfall. The Visigoths first heard the truth from a wounded Alan horseman who collapsed at the edge of their settlement. His voice trembled as he spoke of villages burned overnight, of warriors swept aside in minutes, of families running without looking back. The elders listened quietly, and no one argued anymore. The time of denial was over. The dangerous truth was clear. The Visigoths could not stay where they were. If they remained north of the Danube, they would face the Huns alone, and no forest could protect them, and no river could stop the riders, and no alliance could save them. They needed refuge. They needed a shield, and the only place strong enough to stand between them and destruction was the Roman Empire. This idea frightened the Visigoths. For generations, they had lived in the shadow of Rome. Sometimes allies, sometimes enemies, always outsiders. Rome was powerful, structured, disciplined. The Visigoths were free, wild, rooted in their own ancient traditions. To ask Rome for help, to request permission to cross the Danube, to seek refuge inside Roman borders. It felt like surrender. But survival was more important than pride. The leaders gathered. Fritigern spoke with calm authority. We must ask Rome to let us cross the river, not as conquerors, but as refugees. No one liked the word, yet everyone understood. Mothers looked at their children and nodded silently. Warriors closed their eyes and accepted the weight of the truth. Elders whispered blessings under their breath. And so, a quiet decision was made. Imagine the scene. The wide blue Danube shimmering under pale sunlight, thousands of Visigoths gathered along its northern bank, wagons loaded with belongings, horses tied in long lines, children clinging to their mothers' warriors standing with their spears, angled downward, not in aggression, but in humility. Fritigern and other Gothic leaders rode forward to the Roman fort across the water. Roman soldiers watched from the walls, armor gleaming, shields lined neatly, discipline written in every movement. They had seen many tribes before, but never a gathering this large, this desperate, this united. A Roman officer stepped forward. Fritigern bowed his head slightly. A gesture the Romans understood as rare among the Goths. He spoke clearly, slowly, respectfully. We seek peace, we seek land to farm, we seek safety from the storm behind us. Grant us passage, and we will be loyal to Rome. The officer stared at the thousands waiting behind him, the women carrying infants, the elders leaning on wooden staffs, the quiet hope in their faces. The plea moved him, and it scared him. He had never seen such a vast people standing at the river's edge, begging for protection. But the decision was not his to make. Messages traveled quickly along the Danube. Riders carried letters from fort to fort. News reached the Eastern Roman Emperor Valens in his distant capital of Constantinople. Valens understood the danger of the Huns, that he knew the Visigoths were strong warriors, that he knew that refusing them could lead to disaster. If the Goths were left with no refuge, they might turn against Rome in desperation. And so, after long debate, after many warnings, after cautious predictions, Valens agreed that he granted the Visigoths permission to cross the Danube and settle within Roman territory, as long as they obeyed Roman law, surrendered their weapons, and provided soldiers for the Roman army. When needed, the Visigoths accepted. They had no other choice. But relief washed over their camps. A calm sigh passed through the thousands who had waited in fear. They believed the worst was over. They believed Rome would protect them. They believed they would find peace, if only they had known. The real suffering, the real betrayal, the real turning point of their destiny was still ahead. But tonight, in the softness of this story, we will not rush to sorrow. We stay with the calm moments, the fragile hope that filled the Visigothic hearts as they prepared to cross the great river. The river that had once separated two worlds now became a bridge. Roman boats went back and forth, carrying families, wagons, animals, leaders, and supplies. Some Visigoths crossed swimming beside their horses. Others waited for hours under the warmest UN. It was not a single crossing. It was a migration of an entire people. Days passed. Nights came softly. Fires glimmered along both banks of the river. Children fell asleep listening to the gentle splash of paddles. Old men murmured prayers of gratitude. Women whispered to their babies that everything would be better now. Under a quiet sky, the Visigoths stepped onto Roman soil. For the first time in their history, they were inside the empire, not as invaders, not as mercenaries, but as guests under Rome's protection. The land felt different, the air warmer, the roads straighter, the villages more orderly. Some felt hope, some felt fear, some felt both. But all believed that they had escaped the storm. Yet even as they settled, subtle signs of trouble appeared. Roman officials demanded bribes for food. Supplies were delayed. Some Roman commanders grew suspicious, even hostile. The Visigoths were forced to sell their children into slavery in exchange for scraps of meat. Leaders begged for grain that never arrived. The agreement Valens had made from his distant capital was not honored by those in charge at the frontier. Hunger crept into the Visigothic camps. Mothers tried to quiet crying infants. Warriors grew restless. Elders whispered that something was wrong. The Visigoths had crossed the Danube seeking safety. But instead, they entered a different kind of danger. Not swords, not arrows, but starvation, cruelty, desperation. And desperate people do not remain calm forever. But for tonight's gentle telling, We stay in the early stage of their suffering, before desperation becomes rebellion, before betrayal becomes war, before history sharpens. We remain in the quiet tension, the uneasy calm, the fragile hope. The next part of the story is where everything changes, where hunger ignites anger, where betrayal breaks peace, and where the Visigoths rise against the empire they once trusted. The camps of the Visigoths grew quieter as days passed, but the quiet was not peaceful. It was a heavy stillness, like a forest holding its breath before a storm. Inside the Roman Empire, they had expected safety. They had expected a warm welcome, promised rations, fertile land, and the protection of Roman legions. Instead, they found hunger clinging to their skin like cold mist. Their children grew thin. Their elders whispered through dry lips. The warriors walked slowly, as if carrying the weight of the entire tribe upon their shoulders. The Romans who had welcomed them across the Danube were not the disciplined, noble soldiers their legends had described. They were corrupt frontier officials, men who cared more for gold than agreements, men who saw the desperate Visigoths not as guests, but as opportunities. Grain shipments never arrived. Meat was rationed so poorly that entire families went days without eating. And when Visigothic leaders begged for help, the officials demanded payment. Payment the Visigoths did not have. Some mothers made the most painful choice they had ever faced. They traded their own children into Roman households, hoping those children might at least be fed, clothed, and kept warm. The Roman traders smiled, seeing profit where the mothers saw heartbreak. Warriors watched helplessly as small hands disappeared behind Roman gates, knowing they had no power to stop it. Fritigern, who had always spoken calmly, began to carry tension across his shoulders. He walked the camps in slow steps each night, listening to crying infants, comforting grieving parents, trying to calm warriors whose tempers grew shorter each day. He knew the tribe could not survive like this. Something would have to change. But he also knew that one wrong move would mean war with Rome, a war the Visigoths could not win alone. And yet the storm from the east still threatened. Each new group of refugees that stumbled into Roman territory brought worse news. The Huns were crushing everything before them. Villages were burned in a single night. Warriors who had once stood proud fled without shame. Rivers were choked with debris from destroyed settlements. The horde was unstoppable, relentless, almost unreal, like a force of nature rather than an army. With danger behind them and betrayal surrounding them, the Visigoths felt trapped in a tightening circle. They had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, only the hope that Rome would remember its promise. But Rome was far away, and the officials on the frontier acted without honor. One evening, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, a faint pink glow spread across the Visigothic camps. The air was cool, carrying the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. A thin fog drifted along the ground, swirling gently around the legs of people trying to prepare their meager meals. A girl sat near a small fire, stirring a pot of watered-down porridge, her hands trembling from exhaustion. An elderly man sat beside her, staring at the flames with empty eyes. His wife had not eaten in 2 days. Nearby, a group of warriors gathered, their voices low but heated. They spoke of taking food by force. They spoke of storming the Roman storehouses. They spoke of killing the frontier officials who had broken their promises. But Fritigern, arriving quietly behind them, placed his hand on a young warrior's shoulder. His touch was firm, steady, grounding. "Not yet," he whispered. "Not yet." But the word hung in the air like the last thread holding a cloth together. The Romans, too, felt uneasy. They saw the desperation in Visigothic eyes. They noticed the way warriors sharpened their blades more often. They heard the murmurs growing louder each night. And instead of easing the tension, they tightened it. They demanded the Visigoths surrender more weapons. They reduced rations further, fearing the Goths might revolt. They even invited Gothic nobles to banquets where they promised friendship, only to treat them with mockery behind their backs. One Roman commander, Lupicinus, seemed particularly suspicious. He watched the Visigoths with narrowed eyes, speaking quietly to his aides, making decisions that worsened the starvation. His motives were unclear. Fear, greed, arrogance, perhaps all three shaped his choices. But whatever the reason, his actions pushed the Visigoths closer and closer to the edge. One night, Fritigern called a secret council. The leaders gathered around a dim fire, cloaks wrapped tightly around their shoulders, faces lit in flickering orange. A heavy silence settled among them. "We cannot survive like this," one elder said, his voice thin. "Our children are dying," added another. "My daughter has not eaten for 2 days," whispered a mother, tears glistening in her eyes. Fritigern listened, absorbing their pain as though it were his own. He spoke softly, slowly, letting each word sink into the night air. "We are still under Rome's protection," he said. "We must remind them of their promise. If we act too soon, we lose everything. If we do nothing..." His voice trailed off. The unspoken end of that sentence hung heavy. If they did nothing, their people would vanish. When the meeting ended, Fritigern walked alone beneath the stars. He looked up at the sky, vast, clear, filled with ancient constellations his people had followed for generations. He wondered how many nights their ancestors had walked under the same sky, seeking safety, seeking a home. He wondered if the gods could hear him now. He whispered a simple plea, "Give us strength." The next day, Lupicinus invited Visigothic leaders to a banquet. He claimed it was to discuss peace, stability, and future arrangements. But the Visigoths suspected something was wrong. The invitation was too sudden, the tone too forced, yet they felt they had no choice. Rejecting the invitation might give the Romans an excuse to accuse them of treachery, so they went. The banquet hall was grand, decorated with mosaics and lit by tall oil lamps. Roman soldiers lined the walls, watching silently. The tables overflowed with roasted meats, baked breads, fruits, and wine. Luxuries the starving Visigoths had not seen in months. The feast felt like an insult, a cruel display of abundance. Still they sat. They ate little out of caution. They drank even less. Lupicinus spoke in long, empty phrases about cooperation. His smile was thin, his eyes cold, and as he spoke, Roman soldiers outside surrounded the Visigothic camps. Fritigern sensed the trap. His heart tightened. Suddenly, a commotion erupted outside the hall. A shout, the clatter of shields, a scream. The Visigoths rose to their feet, but Roman guards blocked the exits. Weapons were drawn. Tension thickened like smoke. Lupicinus ordered the Visigoths detained, and a spark snapped inside them. This moment, this betrayal, was the final push. A young Visigothic warrior lunged at a Roman guard. The room erupted. Tables crashed to the ground. Torches fell from the walls. Screams echoed through the hall. Outside, Visigothic warriors broke free of Roman encirclement. Steel clashed with steel. Horses whinnied in panic. Fires broke out near storehouses. The Visigoths had not planned an uprising. It happened naturally, like a dam breaking under unbearable pressure. Fritigern escaped the hall amid the chaos, surrounded by loyal warriors. Outside, the night sky flickered orange with flames. He saw starving mothers scavenging abandoned Roman food supplies, children running to hide, warriors forming defensive lines. He realized the truth with painful clarity. There was no going back. Rome had betrayed them. Rome had starved them. Rome had trapped them, and Rome had forced their hand. The Visigoths no longer sought refuge. they sought survival, and survival meant rebellion. But even as chaos erupted, Fritigern tried to calm his people. He ordered warriors to protect families, not chase fleeing Romans. He told elders to gather children. He told scouts to prepare routes deeper into Roman territory, that he knew a war was beginning. A war the Visigoths did not want, but could no longer avoid. Yet tonight, in the softness of this story, we pause before that war grows loud. We rest in the quiet heartbeat between betrayal and uprising, in the dim glow of the campfires, in the breath drawn before the first battle cry. The Visigoths, who once only sought safety, now stood at the threshold of destiny, hungry, wounded, betrayed, but unified, and when you're ready, we will continue their journey into the battles that would shake an empire, into the march that would reshape Europe, into the moment when the Visigoths would stand before the mighty city of Rome itself. As the first light of dawn spread softly across the horizon, the Visigothic camp stirred with a heavy tension that clung to the air like mist. The uprising of the night before had not been planned, yet it had unfolded with a kind of inevitability, as though every moment of suffering, every broken promise, every hungry child had pointed toward this single eruption. Now, in the pale morning glow, the consequences of that eruption lay scattered across the ground. Fires smoldered among Roman outposts. Abandoned shields glistened with dew. The silence after the chaos felt thick and unnatural, broken only by quiet footsteps and the hushed voices of anxious families. Mothers clutched their children closer. Elders leaned against wooden carts, trying to catch their breath. Warriors moved with a new sharpness in their eyes, focused, alert, aware that the world had changed overnight. Fritigern walked through the camp, feeling the weight of thousands of lives resting on his shoulders. Every gaze that turned toward him carried the same silent question. What now? He did not show the depth of his worry. Leadership, he knew, required calm, even when his own thoughts swirled in uncertainty. He greeted people gently, placed reassuring hands on tense shoulders, and offered quiet promises that the tribe would find a way through this storm. But inside, he knew the truth. The Visigoths could no longer remain in this place. Rome would see the uprising as rebellion. Reinforcements would come. The officials who had caused this suffering would just be the beginning. Soon, disciplined Roman legions would march against them. Well-trained, heavily armored, relentless. The Visigoths could not allow themselves to be trapped between the approaching armies, and the river they had crossed with hope now turned into desperation. He met with the tribal leaders again, this time in a wide clearing where the last embers of a fire glowed faintly. They spoke in low tones, the early morning light casting long shadows across their faces. "We cannot stay," one elder said. "The Romans will return with force," a warrior added. "We must move," whispered a mother, rocking her child. "But where?" Fritigern listened quietly, thinking through every possibility. The Visigoths were not raiders by nature. They were travelers, migrants, people seeking a home. They did not revel in violence. But Rome had closed its doors and broken its promises. Now, to survive, the tribe had to rely on its own strength. He finally spoke, his voice steady and calm despite the tension wrapped tight in his chest. "We move south," he said. "We find open land, far from the corrupt officials. We stay ahead of Roman forces, and we remain together." There was no argument. The tribe trusted him, not because he commanded them with force, but because he had always led with compassion. He understood their pain. He shared their hunger. He breathed their fear. Now, he would guide them away from danger. The Visigoths began to pack what little they had. Wagons creaked under the weight of belongings. Horses snorted softly, sensing the urgency. Children clung to parents, sensing the tension even if they could not understand it. Warriors moved in protective circles around the camp, watching the surrounding hills for the first signs of Roman banners as they prepared to leave. A quiet realization swept through the tribe. They had no home now, no safe place to return to. The moment they crossed the river seeking refuge, their old life disappeared. And now, with Rome turning against them, their future felt even more uncertain. The land ahead was unfamiliar, the dangers unknown. But they had each other, and this unity became their greatest strength. The slow migration began. Long lines of people stretched across the landscape, moving at a steady but cautious pace. Dust rose beneath their feet. The sound of wheels turning over uneven ground created a constant low rumble. Birds circled overhead, their shadows drifting across faces worn by sleepless nights as Fritigern rode at the front of the column. He looked out over the rolling terrain. Green hills stretched into the distance. A river wound through the valley. The world appeared peaceful, almost serene in the early morning light. But he knew better than to trust that calm. The Romans would come. Hours passed, and the tribe moved deeper into Roman territory. Along the way, abandoned fields and empty villages came into view. Small settlements left vacant as people fled the advancing Huns. The Visigoths saw signs of fear everywhere. Homes with doors left open, tools lying in gardens, carts half loaded before being abandoned. The terror spreading from the east had reached even here, and in that strange emptiness, the Visigoths found a temporary sense of relief. There were no Roman soldiers in sight, no corrupt officials demanding payment, no starvation traps set by scheming commanders. Just open land, quiet, untouched for now. They rested by a gentle stream as the sun rose higher. Children splashed cool water on their faces. Elders drank slowly, savoring each sip. The tribe shared what little food they had left, passing small portions to those who needed them most. The atmosphere softened slightly, not joyful but briefly calmer. Fritigern used the moment to speak with his closest advisors. They discussed the Roman military, their likely movements, and the strategies the Visigoths would need to adopt. It was a strange thing to sit beneath a peaceful sky discussing war, but it was necessary. They were no longer refugees. They were survivors preparing for what would come next as they talked. A scout approached quickly, dust rising behind him. He dismounted with urgency and bowed his head before speaking. "Roman forces are gathering," he said. "Lupicinus is calling for reinforcements." Fritigern nodded slowly. He had expected this. The Romans would not allow a tribe of thousands to march freely through their lands after an uprising. They would come with discipline, strategy, and the belief that they were restoring order. But the Visigoths were not the same desperate people who had arrived starving and weak. Their unity had hardened. Their suffering had sharpened them. Their betrayal had ignited something ancient, the will of a people who had endured countless migrations, countless storms. Yet even so, Fritigern did not want war. He wanted safety, security, a home where no child went hungry, where no mother had to trade her child for bread. He hoped, quietly, that somehow Rome might still find reason. But hope felt fragile. The tribe moved again before the sun reached its peak. Their pace quickened, not a run, but a determined march. The warriors formed tighter formations around the civilians. Their steps became more synchronized, more deliberate. It was the movement of a nation, not a wandering crowd that as afternoon light drifted across the fields, shadows lengthening over the caravan. The first signs of Roman pursuit appeared. A distant glint of metal along the ridge, too far to threaten, but close enough to remind the Visigoths that their time was running out. The sight stirred old fear among the people. Mothers pulled their children closer. Young warriors whispered nervously, but no one broke formation. They trusted Fritigern, and they trusted each other. Late in the day, they reached a stretch of forest. Tall trees sheltered them from the sun. Birds sang softly, unaware of the tension moving beneath the branches. In the cool shade, the Visigoths found a moment to breathe. They set up a temporary camp. The forest floor smelled of pine and earth. Giving a sense of grounding, Fritigern walked slowly between the trees, absorbing the forest's calm. For a brief moment, the war felt far away. He listened to the wind rustling through the branches, and it reminded him of stories elders told around winter fires. Stories of ancestral lands, of mountains and rivers left behind, of the long paths their people had walked for generations. He wondered how much farther this path would stretch that night. As families curled beside small fires and warriors kept watch along the edges of the forest, Fritigern sat alone, gazing up at the sky through gaps in the canopy. Stars flickered like distant embers. His thoughts drifted through the darkness, searching for answers. He did not want to lead his people into war, yet every path seemed to bend toward it. Rome's broken promise had changed everything, and deep within him, he felt a quiet resolve forming. A strength he did not seek but now carried that if Rome pushed them into battle, the Visigoths would stand. They would fight not for conquest, but for the right to live, for the right to exist. Tomorrow the march would continue. Tomorrow perhaps the Romans would draw closer. But tonight there was still calm, still the gentle rhythm of breathing, still space for rest. And as the fires dimmed and the forest settled into silence, the Visigoths slept with the knowledge that they were no longer a displaced people wandering without purpose. They were a nation, moving together toward whatever destiny awaited them. The night settled gently over the forest, wrapping everything in a cool, calming stillness. And when the morning finally arrived, it did so softly, like a whisper rather than a command. Light filtered through the leaves in quiet golden strands, drifting down onto the Visigothic camp as though the forest itself wished to soothe them. Birds called in gentle notes, the kind that begin slowly and grow only with the pace of waking breath. It was the kind of morning that invited deep, slow relaxation, the kind that reminded weary hearts that even in hardship, the world could still offer moments of peace. For a little while, the Visigoths simply existed in this calm. Warriors sat near trees, letting the early breeze brush against their skin. Children rubbed sleep from their eyes, their movements unhurried. Elders warmed their hands near small fires, watching smoke rise in thin silver threads. And within this fragile quiet, even the worries that had weighed so heavily on everyone felt slightly softened, as if the forest held them gently for a moment. Allowing minds to rest, Fritigern moved through the camp at an easy pace. He spoke softly to those who greeted him, offering reassurance in a voice that matched the tranquility of the morning. His presence alone carried a steadiness that helped others breathe more freely. For a moment, he allowed himself to savor the stillness, knowing well that once the tribe began moving again, calm would be harder to hold on to. But this pause, however gentle, could not last forever. The Visigoths had to continue their journey, guided by both necessity and the shadow of Rome's pursuit. So slowly, peacefully, with the sun rising higher through the branches, the camp began to prepare for movement. Cloaks were folded, fires were extinguished, wagons creaked softly as they were loaded, the sound blending naturally into the forest's morning chorus as they moved out of the trees. The light shifted more brightly, spilling across rolling fields ahead. The landscape widened, offering open ground but also less protection. The warriors formed their customary guard positions. Families moved more closely together. The caravan stretched long and yet remained connected by an invisible thread of shared struggle and shared hope. The morning's earlier softness lingered in the air, but beneath it, a quiet alertness grew. The Visigoths knew the Romans would not ignore what happened. They knew the uprising at the banquet was only the beginning of a much larger struggle. And as they traveled deeper into unfamiliar territory, they could almost feel unseen eyes upon them. Distant, watchful, calculating. Around midday, scouts returned with new information. Roman soldiers had been sighted in the distance. Not an army, but small groups moving with purpose. They were not marching toward battle, but tracking, following the Visigoths' trail through fields and forests. It was a reminder that time was thin. Each mile mattered. Still, the tribe continued at a steady pace. Panic did not grip them. They moved with determination, almost gracefully in their unity. Along the path, they passed gentle hills and quiet streams, scenes that carried a sense of calm despite the tension beneath their steps. And in that blend of peace and uncertainty, the Visigoths found a rhythm, one that echoed the heartbeat of a people refusing to break. Fritigern often glanced toward the horizon. He was not afraid, but deeply thoughtful. He understood Rome's strength, but he also understood something Rome did not: the power of a people fighting not for conquest, but for survival. The Visigoths did not seek glory. They sought only the safety Rome had promised them. A promise broken in a way that left scars far deeper than hunger. As afternoon shadows stretched across the path, the caravan approached a village abandoned in haste. Doors hung open. Tools lay scattered. Food stores were empty. The people who once lived here had fled the terror of the Huns, leaving behind only silence. For the Visigoths, the village offered both shelter and sadness, proof of how far fear had spread across the world. They searched carefully, gathering small things that could help them. A few sacks of grain left in a corner, pottery still intact, blankets woven with simple patterns. For a brief moment, families sat among the ruined houses, grateful for the chance to breathe, to eat a little more, to rest their feet after long hours of walking. Children explored the safe areas of the village, their voices soft with curiosity rather than fear. The quiet houses, though empty, felt less threatening than the Roman outposts they had fled. Warriors repaired straps on their weapons. Elders leaned against walls warmed by the afternoon sun, grateful for even a short moment of comfort. But soon, scouts returned again. Roman riders were closing in, not attacking yet, but narrowing the distance. With that news, the tribe moved once more, slipping out of the village and into the wilderness beyond it. As they walked, sunlight filtered through the clouds in warm beams. The mood, though tense, remained steady. The caravan entered a wide valley where tall grass swayed in slow, calming waves. The breeze carried a faint scent of wildflowers, something sweet and delicate that softened the fatigue pressing into their shoulders. Children fell asleep on wagons, rocked by the gentle motion. Mothers hummed quiet songs. Even the animals seemed calmer, moving in quiet harmony with the tribe's pace. But as evening approached, a different sound reached them, the rhythmic thud of distant hooves. Roman cavalry. The Visigoths halted, forming a defensive circle. Warriors positioned themselves with discipline, protecting the families inside the formation. The tension rose like a held breath. Yet when the cavalry appeared, they did not charge. They stopped at a distance, forming a line atop a small ridge. Their commander raised a hand but did not move closer. It was a message: we see you. We are watching. But also, not yet. For a long moment, nothing moved. The wind carried only the sound of grass brushing against itself. Time stretched thin and delicate. Then, slowly, the Roman riders turned and disappeared over the ridge. The Visigoths exhaled, a collective breath they hadn't realized they were holding. They continued moving until the valley opened into a wooded area where they decided to camp for the night. Fires were lit, but small, discreet, hidden beneath the shelter of trees. Night settled again, darker and deeper beneath the forest canopy. And yet, within the camp, The warmth of those small fires brought a sense of quiet togetherness. People ate what they had gathered, savoring each bite. Warriors spoke softly about the Romans they had seen. Elders whispered memories of times when their people had faced hardships before and survived. Fritigern sat near a small fire, lost in thought. He could feel the weight of the future pressing against him, but he could also feel the strength of his people surrounding him. And somewhere in that balance, he found calm. Families drifted into sleep, their breath steady, blending with the sounds of the forest. The night air felt cool and refreshing. Crickets sang softly. Leaves rustled above in gentle patterns. Even the distant worry of Roman pursuit could not completely disrupt the soothing rhythm of the world around them that I end this fragile peace. The Visigoths rested, knowing that dawn would bring them closer to the moment when their destiny would collide with Rome's. The forest wrapped the Visigoths in a cool, quiet shelter through the night, and when the next morning arrived, it crept gently into the camp like a soft breath. Dawn filtered through the leaves in pale, silvery strands that landed on sleeping figures curled beneath cloaks and blankets. The world seemed to exhale slowly, with a calm that felt rare and precious in uncertain times. Birds began their singing again, tentative at first, then more confidently as the light strengthened. The sound echoed softly between the trees, carrying a kind of reassurance the weary travelers deeply needed as people gradually stirred awake. There was no rush. Mothers stretched slowly, warming their hands near rekindled coals. Fathers lifted still sleepy children into their arms. Elders blinked at the soft morning haze, letting their minds settle before rising. Warriors checked their weapons in smooth, practiced motions, each movement deliberate and quiet. The forest seemed to wrap its arms around everyone, offering comfort before the day's journey resumed. Fritigern sat near the faint embers of a small fire, his eyes half closed as he listened to the sounds of his people waking. In these soft morning moments, he found clarity, not through loud declarations or decisive commands, but in the quiet presence of his tribe living, breathing, enduring together. He knew that despite everything Rome had done, despite the hunger and the betrayal, his people still held a deep resilience within them. That resilience felt like a warm ember glowing steadily inside him. Yet the reality of their situation rested at the edges of his thoughts, ever present. The Romans were close, too close. The brief encounter with the cavalry the previous evening had been a warning, a clear sign that Rome was watching, positioning, preparing. The Visigoths were not yet under attack, but they were being herded, guided into uncertainty like a river gradually pushed toward a narrow canyon. Still, the morning belonged to peace. It always did. Fritigern let the calm settle inside him before standing and beginning the gentle work of preparing everyone to move again. And as the caravan gradually organized itself, a subtle shift of determination filled the air. They continued through the forest, walking along narrow paths that wound between tall trunks and mossy stones. Shafts of golden sunlight spilled down in patches, warming their faces as they passed. Children stared wide-eyed at the forest's beauty, pointing out small animals and colorful wildflowers. Even the warriors, though vigilant, felt the soothing presence of the woods easing the tension in their shoulders. By midday, the trees thinned, and the world opened into rolling hills. Far in the distance, the faint outlines of Roman structures glimmered, watchtowers or small fortifications left behind by frontier troops. They were not close enough to threaten, but they cast a mental shadow all the same. The Visigoths altered their path, keeping to valleys where the tall grass swayed in peaceful waves. As they walked, Fritigern considered the Romans carefully. Rome had always relied on the strength of its military discipline and its belief in superiority. But the Rome he now faced was not the Rome of old. Corruption infected many officials. Local commanders acted out of pride or fear rather than wisdom. The empire stretched thin under pressures from all sides. Huns in the east, internal power struggles, economic strain. And within that stretched fabric, the Visigoths had slipped inside like a spark into dry leaves. Fritigern wondered whether Rome truly understood the gravity of its mistakes, whether it could see how its betrayal had changed everything, whether it realized that the Visigoths were no longer passive refugees but a united people walking with purpose. That purpose did not include conquest. It did not include burning Roman towns or plundering innocent villagers, but it did include survival. And survival now meant movement. In the early afternoon, the tribe reached a river glimmering beneath the sunlight. The water flowed gently, creating soft ripples that glistened like tiny stars. People knelt to drink, cupping the cool water in their hands. Children splashed their fingers in it, giggling quietly. Some washed their faces, letting the freshness clear away the strain of travel. The river felt like a blessing, a small gift from the land itself, reminding them they still belonged somewhere, even if Rome insisted otherwise. Warriors stood guard along the banks, scanning the hills. The tension had not disappeared, but it no longer suffocated them. Instead, it simply existed as a subtle awareness in the background, like a faraway hum that could not be ignored but did not dominate the mind. Fritigern studied the flowing river thoughtfully. Water was life, movement, change. He imagined the river's path winding endlessly through lands unknown, carving its way between stone and earth with patience rather than force. It never rushed, but it always reached its destination. The Visigoths, he thought, must be like this river. Steady, patient, persistent. After resting a while, the tribe continued onward. The landscape grew more open, dotted with fields that had once belonged to Roman farmers. Some were freshly abandoned, with tools still stuck in the soil. Others had been left months earlier, overgrown with tall grass that swayed in slow patterns. The wind brushed across the fields with a soft, rhythmic sound, like the world whispering encouragement. As evening approached, the sky shifted into warm hues, soft oranges and pinks blending gently across the horizon. The Visigoths found a wide plain where they could set their camp. Fires were lit slowly, giving off gentle glows that flickered in the growing darkness. The sounds of cooking, quiet conversation, and weary but steady movement blended together into a peaceful symphony. Children fell asleep early, wrapped in blankets near their parents. Elders sat in small groups, sharing memories in soft voices. Some spoke of the Danube crossing, others of the distant homelands left behind. Warriors moved through the camp, checking on everyone. Even in the shadow of uncertainty, the tribe felt connected, woven together by shared hardship and shared hope. Later in the night, a soft tension rippled through the camp. Scouts returned with new information. A larger group of Roman soldiers had been seen several miles behind them. They were not advancing quickly, but their presence was clear and deliberate. Rome was no longer simply watching. It was closing the distance. Fritigern took the news calmly, though he felt a quiet heaviness in his chest. He knew time was thinning. Rome would attempt to force a confrontation soon. And when it did, the Visigoths would need to be ready, not with anger, but with unity. He walked the perimeter of the camp, speaking with guards in gentle tones. He reminded them to rest when they could, to breathe slowly, to trust the strength that had carried them this far. His voice was low, steady, almost melodic, a grounding presence that helped weary minds loosen their fear. Near one of the smaller fires, a young mother hummed a lullaby to her child. The melody drifted through the cool night air, blending with the crackling of flames and the whisper of wind through the grass. The softness of it touched something deep inside Fritigern's heart. It reminded him why they marched, why they endured, why they would not surrender to Rome's cruelty. They marched for moments like this, for the hope that one day mothers would sing without fear, children would sleep without hunger, and families would rest without the threat of betrayal. Slowly, as the night deepened, the camp settled into sleep. The stars above shimmered gently, watching over the weary travelers. The breeze quieted, the fires dimmed to warm, glowing embers, and even though danger lurked not far behind, the peace of the night wrapped the Visigoths in a cocoon of rest. Somewhere beyond the hills, the Romans plotted. Somewhere even farther beyond, the Huns ravaged the world. But here, in this moment, the Visigoths breathed in calmness and exhaled their fear. Tomorrow, they would walk again. Tomorrow, Rome would draw nearer. Tomorrow, destiny would take another step toward them. The night faded slowly into a pale gray dawn, the kind of morning that seemed reluctant to wake the world. Soft mist drifted across the plains where the Visigoths had camped, curling gently around wagons and sleeping forms like a cool, protective blanket. It was the kind of early light that encouraged deep breaths, slow movements, and quiet reflection. An atmosphere calm enough to steady even the most anxious hearts. Point one by one, as if rising with the same rhythm, the Visigoths stirred. Warriors stretched their arms, feeling the cool air touch their skin. Mothers whispered softly to their children, coaxing them awake without urgency. Elders rose gradually, leaning on staffs or on the shoulders of family members, taking their time to adjust to the morning. There was no rush, no hurried scrambling, just a slow awakening carried on a peaceful breeze. Fritigern watched over the camp from a small rise, the soft light outlining his figure in gentle gold. His eyes moved slowly across the people below, their quiet movements, their tired but determined faces, the way they remained close to each other like a flock that refused to scatter. Even after weeks of hardship, betrayal, and fear, they still carried a deep, steady strength. They had not broken. They had not faltered. They continued forward, step by step, one sunrise at a time. As the mist thinned, the landscape revealed itself again. Rolling hills stretched far in every direction. Small clusters of trees swayed gently in the morning breeze. Dew sparkled on blades of grass like tiny stars fallen to earth. In this stillness, it was easy to forget the danger trailing behind them. Rome felt far away. Threats felt distant. For a few precious moments, peace held the world quietly in its hands. But as always, peace was a fragile thing. A scout approached Fritigern, moving quietly but with clear urgency. He bowed his head respectfully before speaking. "The Romans continue to follow," he said softly. "They keep their distance, but they do not turn back. More banners have joined them." Fritigern nodded, absorbing the news without surprise. "Are they preparing to attack?" "Not yet," the scout replied. "But they are watching, learning our movements, waiting." Fritigern understood that too well. Rome was patient, strategic. It preferred to choose the moment of conflict carefully. But the Visigoths could not allow themselves to be pinned down. They had to keep moving, keep space between themselves and the soldiers who shadowed them. The morning passed slowly, filled with gentle preparation. The tribe began to move across the plains, their footsteps blending with the soft rustling of grass. The air carried a faint sweetness from blooming wildflowers scattered in small clusters. Children pointed at butterflies fluttering in erratic patterns. The world felt alive and tender, even as tension coiled quietly beneath the surface. They traveled for hours, passing through quiet fields and abandoned farmhouses. Each empty home told the same story. People had fled in fear of the Hunnic advance. And in a strange way, that fear created pockets of safety for the Visigoths. The land was open. Roman citizens had vanished. The roads lay empty and unguarded. In the wake of destruction, they found temporary refuge. By midday, The sun warmed the plains, and the tribe paused near a large stand of trees for rest. People gathered water from a small stream. Others sat beneath the shade, their bodies grateful for the chance to pause. The sound of flowing water mingled with gentle conversations and the soft buzzing of insects drifting lazily through the warm air. Fritigern walked among his people, offering quiet reassurance. He noticed the fatigue in their faces, the kind that settled not only into muscles but into spirit. And yet he also noticed something unbroken in their eyes: resolve. A steady determination that could not easily be extinguished. He sat with a group of elders who spoke in low tones about the old days, about the forests beyond the Danube, the mountains their ancestors once crossed, the rituals that bound their people together. Their voices carried a soothing cadence, one that reminded him why he fought so hard to lead them. They were not wandering aimlessly. They were following the long thread of their history, carrying it forward through the chaos of a changing world. As the afternoon stretched on, the caravan moved again. The shadows grew longer. The sky deepened into a soft, calming blue, and in that widening stillness, something unexpected occurred. A small group of Roman scouts appeared on a ridge, but instead of drawing weapons or calling out commands, they simply watched. They did not move to attack. They did not approach. They observed with a strange hesitation, as though uncertain whether the Visigoths were truly enemies. Fritigern studied them from a distance. There was no hostility in their posture, only caution. Perhaps, he thought, even Roman soldiers could see the injustice their people had suffered. But caution was never a guarantee of mercy. The Visigoths pressed onward, not slowing their pace. Evening fell gracefully over the land, painting the sky in hues of rose and deep violet. When the tribe found a place to camp, the ground was soft with tall grass and wild herbs. Fires were lit in small circles. The scent of smoke drifted lightly into the cooling air. Families settled together, sharing what little food they had, grateful for another day without battle. As the stars came out, bright and steady across the sky, a gentle wind rustled through the camp. It was the kind of night that encouraged quiet reflection. Children fell asleep against their parents. Warriors sat sharpening their blades with slow, rhythmic motions, not out of eagerness for war, but out of necessity. The edge of a blade could mean the difference between life and death, and each warrior knew the importance of preparation. Fritigern walked the perimeter of the camp. He saw the flickering glow on the faces of warriors keeping watch. He saw the soft rise and fall of sleeping families. And with each step, he felt a deepening resolve anchor inside him. He was not guiding just a tribe. He was guiding a nation shaped by hardship, strengthened by unity. He paused on a small hill overlooking the camp. The moon hung low, casting a gentle silver glow across the plains. In that soft light, he allowed himself a breath, a slow, deep, grounding breath. For one moment, he let the quiet of the night enter him fully, washing away the tension that had followed him for weeks. He knew tomorrow might bring confrontation. He knew the Romans might press harder, closing the distance. He knew the world was shifting around them like sand beneath rushing water. But he also knew this: the Visigoths were not broken. They were not lost. They were moving toward a destiny greater than the suffering behind them. And so, beneath the calm sky, with the steady hum of the camp surrounding him, Fritigern closed his eyes briefly and whispered a quiet promise, one meant only for the night to hear. "We will endure." Morning returned with a tenderness that felt almost deliberate, as though the world itself understood how much the Visigoths needed a gentle awakening. A cool breeze swept softly across the plains, moving through tall grass in slow, rhythmic patterns. The first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon in warm hues, illuminating the camp with a quiet sincerity. People stirred gradually. No alarms, no rush, only the calm, natural unfolding of a new day. Children rubbed their eyes and leaned sleepily against their parents. Mothers brushed strands of hair away from tired faces, offering soft smiles. Warriors rose with deliberate slowness, stretching stiff limbs while keeping their movements peaceful and controlled. The entire camp carried the same unspoken desire: to extend the calm for as long as the day would allow. Fritigern walked through the early morning mist, observing his people with a steady gaze filled with affection and responsibility. His presence was grounding, like a warm anchor in a sea of uncertainty. The soft light caught the edges of his cloak, giving him a quiet silhouette that many found comforting. When people greeted him, he answered in low, soothing tones, his voice a gentle reminder that they were not alone, not lost, not forgotten. The scouts he had sent out before sunrise returned silently. Their faces were serious but not alarmed. They approached Fritigern with respectful bows before delivering their message. "The Romans follow at a distance," one said, "but they have not broken formation. They are watching, only watching." This was both good and unsettling. The Romans were disciplined enough not to rush into a fight, but determined enough not to turn back. Their presence lingered like a shadow the Visigoths could not shake, always behind, always watching, always waiting. Yet the day still belonged to the Visigoths, and so, with measured breathing and steady steps, they prepared once more to move forward. Wagons shifted into motion, hooves pressed softly against the earth. Families formed tightly knit groups, moving with a synchronized instinct polished by weeks of shared hardship. The caravan became a flowing river once again, winding through open land under a sky that seemed impossibly wide. The morning air held a soft warmth as the sun climbed higher. Fields stretched endlessly before them, dotted with remnants of old Roman settlements. Stone walls partially collapsed, wells filled with still water, traces of lives abandoned in haste. Sometimes the tribe found tools or clothing left behind. Sometimes half-eaten grain stores that had escaped pillaging. All of these small discoveries were gathered quietly, respectfully, as if the Visigoths did not wish to disturb ghosts of the people who had fled. Fritigern studied these empty settlements with a heavy heart. The world was shifting. The Huns pressed from the east like a storm no one could tame. Rome weakened from within. Boundaries blurred. Chaos spread. The Visigoths were not the only ones caught in this tide, but they were among the few who still marched together as one that as midday approached. The sun warmed the earth, carrying the scent of crushed grass and distant wildflowers. The caravan paused near a cluster of tall oaks. The shade beneath them offered relief. Warriors drank deeply from leather waterskins. Mothers fed children with simple meals gathered from their limited supplies. Elders rested on low stones warmed by the sun. Their eyes closed, but their faces peaceful. Fritigern took this moment to gather his closest warriors. They spoke quietly, forming a circle near the largest oak. The leaders reported everything they had observed. Roman patrols at the edges of sight, fresh tracks from mounted troops, the subtle tightening of the Roman shadow behind them. The Romans were waiting for a misstep, or perhaps for reinforcements. They were patient, very patient. "What do you think they want?" one warrior asked. Fritigern paused before answering, choosing his words carefully. "Rome wants control," he said softly. "They cannot accept that a people they once deemed refugees now move freely within their borders. They follow us because they fear what we might become." "And what will we become?" asked another. Fritigern's eyes softened. "A people who survive," he said. When the tribe continued its march, the land grew more uneven. Hills rose gently from the plains, creating valleys where sound carried strangely, sometimes amplified, sometimes swallowed. The Visigoths moved cautiously but without panic. Their discipline had grown stronger. They trusted their scouts, trusted their leaders, trusted one another. Each step was measured, each decision deliberate. In the late afternoon, the sky began shifting into deeper blues and soft golds. The sun's light stretched farther across the land, painting long shadows that swayed with the movement of the grass. The caravan came upon an area dotted with ancient stones, remnants of a long-forgotten people. No carvings remained clear, but the shapes suggested old rituals, old gatherings, old ways of life. The Visigoths passed through quietly, almost reverently, as though sensing the weight of forgotten histories beneath their feet. As the sun dipped lower, scouts arrived again, more urgently this time. Roman troops had been spotted in larger numbers, but still not advancing. Fritigern listened carefully to every detail. The Romans remained on the horizon, never closing fast enough for battle, never withdrawing far enough to be ignored. They were waiting for something, a command, a signal, a moment of perceived weakness. The Visigoths had none to offer. Evening settled upon the world in gentle hues. The tribe found a spot to camp beside a stream bordered by clusters of willow trees. Their branches dipped gracefully into the flowing water, creating soft ripples that reflected the fading light. Fires were lit slowly, their warmth spreading through the camp like a calm embrace. The scent of smoke drifted into the air, mingling with the fresh scent of water and willow leaves. Families gathered near the fires, sharing stories in quiet tones. Some spoke of old homelands, of forests they missed, of rivers that had once been familiar. Others spoke of hopes for the future, imagining a home where the tribe could build without fear, without hunger, without betrayal. These dreams gave them strength, weaving together hearts that had endured much and still chose to believe in tomorrow. Children fell asleep early, lulled by the gentle murmuring of water and the crackling of flames. Warriors sat in small groups, sharpening spears or checking bowstrings, but their movements were unhurried, almost meditative. The night felt calm, unbelievably calm considering the danger behind them. Fritigern walked to the edge of the stream, feeling the cool water flow over his fingertips. The gentle current reminded him of the path they traveled. Always forward, never still, shaped by obstacles but not stopped by them. He let the sound of the river settle inside him, soothing the tension coiled deep in his mind. As darkness fully embraced the land, stars shimmered like scattered diamonds across the sky. A crescent moon hung low, casting a soft silver glow over the camp. The air grew cool and comforting. The fires burned steadily, their warm light flickering across resting faces. In this quiet space between danger and dawn, Fritigern breathed deeply. He sensed the storm that would soon break, the confrontation with Rome that could no longer be avoided. But he also sensed the strength his people carried, a strength the Romans did not understand, born not from conquest but from endurance, unity, and heart. And so, in the silence of the night, he whispered the thought that lived in every heartbeat of his tribe. We are still here. The night settled deeply around the Visigothic camp, and when morning finally began to rise, it did so with a gentle softness that felt like a blessing. The first light stretched slowly across the sky, painting everything in a pale, peaceful glow. The stream beside the camp moved with a quiet rhythm, its surface shimmering in the early dawn. Willow branches swayed lightly in the cool breeze, brushing the water in graceful arcs. Birds began their morning songs, their melodies delicate and reassuring, as though encouraging the weary travelers to start the day with steadier hearts. The Visigoths woke slowly, almost reluctantly. After so many days of tension, the softness of this morning created a cocoon of calm that no one wished to break too quickly. Mothers sat quietly with their children still half asleep in their arms. Elders rose slowly, leaning on their staffs with measured breaths. Warriors stretched stiff limbs, feeling the cool air settle across their skin before rising fully to their feet. Their movements were unhurried, as though they wished to stretch the peaceful dawn across as many heartbeats as possible. Fritigern stood near the edge of the camp, his gaze sweeping over the waking tribe. The early light painted his face with a quiet determination, but also with a tenderness he rarely allowed others to see. He watched the families, the tired but resilient warriors, the elders who carried memory in their bones. In these still moments, he felt the profound weight of his responsibility. Yet he also felt a deep sense of purpose, one that ran through him like a steady river. He turned as scouts approached. Their steps were soft but purposeful. Bowing slightly, they delivered their morning report. "Roman forces remain behind us," one said. "They held their distance during the night, but their numbers continue to grow." Another added, "They are not preparing for immediate battle, but they are no longer simply observing. They march more deliberately now." Fritigern listened without interruption. The news was not unexpected, yet hearing it spoken aloud brought a subtle heaviness to the morning air. Still, he nodded with steady calm. "They will choose their moment," he said softly, "but so will we." He took a deep breath, letting the cool morning wind fill his lungs before exhaling slowly. "We move soon," he added. "Tell everyone to eat, rest, breathe. We have miles ahead of us." The camp moved into its morning rhythm. Cook fires crackled quietly. The smell of simple meals drifted gently upward. The tribe ate in silence, not from fear but from a kind of grounded awareness. They knew the journey was long and uncertain. They knew the Romans followed closely, but breakfast was a moment of peace they allowed themselves to savor. When the caravan finally began its movement, the sun had risen higher, casting warm light over the plains. They traveled in steady formation, as they always did, families in the center, warriors at the edges, scouts moving like shadows along the distant hills. The rhythm of marching feet echoed across the landscape in a soothing cadence. Even this sound carried a calming consistency, like the heartbeat of a united people. The path led them toward thicker forests that rose ahead like a dark green sea. The Visigoths moved beneath the canopy, grateful for the shade. Sunlight filtered through the leaves in soft, dappled patterns that danced across faces and wagons. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, grounding and steadying. Children looked up in wonder at the towering trees. Warriors occasionally ran their fingers along rough bark, drawing comfort from the deep-rootedness of the forest. Within this green shelter, the tension that had followed them like a shadow felt slightly lighter. The Romans were not nearby. Their horses would struggle to move quietly in this terrain. It gave the Visigoths a rare sense of privacy, a rare sense of breathing room in a world that had offered them so little. By midday, they emerged from the forest into a valley where golden grass swayed softly in the wind. The valley stretched far in both directions, bordered by distant hills. It felt open, exposed, but beautiful in its vastness. The tribe moved into the valley with quiet caution, always mindful of the horizon as they made their way across. Fritigern rode alongside his warriors. He spoke with them in calm tones, discussing not only strategy but the well-being of their families. His leadership was not cold or distant. It was warm, attentive, human. And because of that, the warriors felt not only loyal to him, but deeply connected. Hours passed. The sun warmed their backs. Shadows shifted beneath their feet. The caravan continued its long, gentle arc across the valley. Near late afternoon, scouts returned once more with new observations. Roman forces had reached the forest edge behind them. They did not enter it, but circled around, keeping the Visigoths within sight. The Roman march was slow, steady, deliberate, a pattern that suggested they were positioning rather than pursuing. "They are waiting for open ground," one scout whispered. "They want a place where they can control the field." Fritigern's jaw tightened slightly, but he nodded. Then we will not give them the ground they want. The tribe pressed onward, maintaining their distance. By evening, the valley narrowed into rolling hills where the land dipped and rose in soft curves. The Visigoths found a sheltered area between two hills to make camp. The grass here was thick and soft. A small spring bubbled nearby, its sound gentle and comforting. The place felt safe, not permanently, but for tonight. Fires flickered as dusk settled. People ate quietly, their exhaustion softened by the calm of the landscape. Children fell asleep early, comforted by the familiar warmth of family. Warriors sat in close circles, speaking in low tones about the Romans, about strategy, about the long road behind them. But their voices carried no panic, only focus, awareness, and unity. Fritigern walked among them, his steps soft. He paused near the spring, letting the cool water run over his hands. He watched the ripples spread and disappear, then return again with renewed patterns. It reminded him of his people. Pushed, pulled, reshaped, but never erased. A few elders approached him, asking quietly what his heart felt for the coming days. Fritigern answered with honesty, but with softness too. "We will face what comes," he said, "and we will face it together." Later, as the stars rose and the camp quieted into deep rest, Fritigern stood on one of the surrounding hills. The breeze touched his cloak, lifting it gently. Below him, the fires of the Visigoths glowed like warm embers scattered across the earth. He listened to the distant sounds of the night, the rustle of grass, the soft calls of nocturnal birds, the whisper of wind moving through the valley, and in that stillness, he felt something unexpected, a moment of quiet reassurance. Not a promise of victory, nor a guarantee of peace, but a reminder that his people had already endured so much and yet remained unbroken. He knew the Romans were close. He knew conflict would come. The land itself seemed to sense the gathering tension. But for now, the valley was calm. The stars were bright, and his people slept under a sky that felt wide and protective. He breathed deeply, slow, steady, grounding. Tomorrow, they would rise again. Tomorrow, they would march further into their destiny. Tomorrow, they would continue the journey that had bound them together so tightly. Dawn returned slowly to the valley, spreading across the land in gentle shades of silver and pale gold. The fires of the Visigoths, burned low through the night, glowed softly like warm embers scattered across a blanket of cool grass. A light mist hovered above the ground, drifting in thin ribbons that wove between sleeping forms. The world felt hushed, peaceful, almost suspended, as though time itself was giving the weary tribe an extra moment to breathe before the day carried them forward again. Children woke first, stretching quietly beneath blankets. Mothers soothed them with soft whispers, mindful not to disturb those still resting. Warriors opened their eyes more slowly, adjusting to the quiet morning as they pushed themselves upright with deliberate, unhurried movements. The soft bubbling of the spring nearby added a calming rhythm, like a gentle lullaby continuing even after sleep had faded. Fritigern rose with measured grace, taking a moment to steady himself before walking through the camp. He felt the familiar ache of responsibility, not heavy enough to crush him, but constant enough to remind him of the thousands who depended on every choice he made. Yet, as he watched families gather their morning meals, he felt a tender swell of something softer than worry, something like pride. Despite everything they had suffered, his people still began each day with a quiet dignity, moving gently, supporting one another, remaining united. The scouts approached him quietly, lowering their voices in respect for the peaceful morning. "The Romans camped behind the far ridge last night," one reported. "Their fires were many, but dim. They do not rush, but they do not disappear." Another added, "They're adjusting their formation. They may be preparing to confront us soon. Fritigern nodded slowly, absorbing every detail without letting tension disturb the calm that still clung to the morning air. They will choose their moment, he said. Until then, we move with care. He spoke the words softly, as though unwilling to disrupt the fragile peace. The Romans were closer than before, but not yet ready to attack. Their caution meant the Visigoths still had time, though not much. The day ahead would need to be handled gently but firmly. Breakfast was simple. Bread shared between families, a handful of dried fruits, water from the spring. The tribe ate in silence. Not fearful silence, but reflective, restful silence. The kind that prepares the soul for another long march. When they set out again, the sun had begun to warm the valley. The light shimmered across the hills, creating gentle shadows that moved with every shift of the land. The caravan formed its familiar shape. Families in the center, warriors along the edges, scouts at the front and back. The movement was slow, steady, deliberate, like a great living river flowing through the countryside. They traveled through rolling hills that rose like soft waves, one blending into the next. The wind brushed through the grass, creating patterns that rustled in soothing rhythm. Even with danger lurking behind them, the natural world offered a quiet comfort, grounding them, reminding them that life still held beauty even in troubled times. Children pointed at distant birds soaring across the sky. Young warriors exchanged soft words about their hopes for finding a new homeland. Elders walked with patient steps, remembering stories of distant lands the tribe had crossed generations before. Each person carried their own thoughts, yet all shared the same direction. By midday, the caravan reached a vast field dotted with wildflowers. Yellow, purple, soft blue. The colors shifted gently in the breeze, forming waves that rolled across the landscape. The Visigoths paused here, grateful for the beauty, grateful for a moment of rest. People sat among the flowers, touching them gently as though uncertain whether they were real after so many days of tension. Fritigern sat among his closest leaders, speaking in low voices about the Romans' behavior. They agreed that something in Rome's approach had changed. The shadowing was too controlled, too calculated. Rome was preparing for something decisive. Not ambush, no. Something larger. Something that required the right ground, the right moment. And that moment was drawing nearer. Yet fear did not take hold of the Visigoths. Instead, there was a quiet understanding. They had fled starvation. They had crossed rivers. They had endured betrayal. And now they walked together not as refugees, but as a united people. The caravan continued moving as the sun drifted westward. The light lengthened across the land, warm and golden. Shadows grew softer and more elongated. The air felt thick with the scent of earth and grass warmed by the afternoon sun. Every step forward carried the tribe deeper into Roman territory, deeper into the uncertain future ahead. Later in the afternoon, scouts returned with new information. Roman infantry had joined the cavalry. Their formations were tightening. Their pace had increased. The Romans no longer followed loosely. They were aligning themselves for a controlled encounter. Fritigern listened with calm intensity. He thanked the scouts, then took time to think quietly. When he finally spoke, it was in a voice gentle but unwavering. "We will not be frightened into their plan," he said. "We continue forward. We choose our own ground." The tribe marched until evening pulled a soft blue veil across the sky. They entered a shallow valley ringed with tall grass and scattered boulders, an area sheltered enough to offer comfort without trapping them should the Romans press closer. Felt safe for tonight at least. Fires were lit with care. The warm light flickered across tired faces. Families sat together, sharing stories and comforting one another. Children drifted into sleep, Lulled by the low murmur of voices and the crackling sound of firewood, warriors sat in watchful circles, sharpening blades, checking shields, but doing so with slow, thoughtful motions that matched the calming rhythm of the night. They felt the tension of what was to come, but they did not let it overshadow the softness of the moment. Fritigern walked to the edge of the camp, looking up at the sky. Stars glowed faintly at first, then more brightly as the night deepened. A soft wind brushed against his cloak, carrying with it the scent of grass and fire smoke. He closed his eyes, allowing the quiet to seep into him. He thought of the path behind them, the hunger, the betrayal, the broken promises. He thought of the path ahead, the unknown, the looming confrontation with Rome. Yet above all, he thought of his people, their resilience, their unity, their hope. It was this hope that kept him strong. It was this hope that guided each decision he made. And in that moment, beneath the vast, silent sky, he whispered to himself, "They follow us, but they do not understand us. We move not for battle. We move for life." As the tribe settled into deep sleep, the land around them grew calm, almost sacred in its silence. The stars shimmered gently overhead. The fires dimmed into glowing embers. The night wrapped the Visigoths in a quiet embrace. Tomorrow, they would walk again. Tomorrow, the Romans would draw closer. Tomorrow, destiny would edge nearer. The night drifted away slowly, as though it too wished to linger just a little longer beside the resting Visigoths. Dawn arrived with a soft glow, spreading over the valley in muted shades of amber and pearl. The grass shimmered with tiny droplets of dew, each one sparkling like a small star caught on a blade of green. A gentle breeze stirred them, carrying the cool, earthy scent of morning across the camp. People woke gradually, stretching quietly beneath their blankets, their movements peaceful and unhurried. Mothers held their children close, whispering gentle greetings as sleepy eyes blinked open. Warriors rose with slow breaths, rolling stiffness out of their shoulders, reminding themselves that another long day awaited. Despite their weariness, the calm of the morning softened their expressions. Fritigern stepped out from where he had rested, taking in the peaceful scene with a steady gaze. The early light cast soft shadows beneath his eyes, but there was a grounded strength in the way he carried himself. He nodded to the warriors who greeted him and paused to help an elder rise from the ground. These simple gestures, quiet as they were, rippled through the tribe as reminders of unity, reminders that no one walked alone. The scouts approached soon after, their faces serious but calm. "The Romans camped farther back this time," one reported softly. "Their fires were many, but dim. They watched us through the night, but they did not move closer." Another added, "They are aligning their forces, not to attack yet, but to tighten their control. They wait for the right terrain." Fritigern absorbed the information slowly, letting it settle. The Romans were patient, dangerously so. They did not seek a chaotic confrontation. They wanted order, structure, a battle on their terms. But the Visigoths had no intention of offering Rome that opportunity. "Today," Fritigern said softly, "we continue forward, steady, calm. We choose our own path." Breakfast was simple but comforting. A small piece of bread passed between families, water shared from the spring, faint traces of dried berries eaten sparingly. The tribe ate peacefully, with the warm quiet of morning wrapping around them like a gentle cloak. Even with the looming threat behind them, they allowed themselves this moment. When they began their march, the valley opened into a stretch of land where the earth dipped and rose in long, sweeping curves. The sun climbed slowly, warming the landscape with a soft glow. The wind brushed through the tall grass, creating patterns that rippled like waves on a calm sea. Children stared, mesmerized by how the land seemed to move with the breeze. The caravan moved with a rhythm that had become as natural as breathing. Families walked close together. Warriors guided the edges with quiet vigilance. The steady crunch of earth beneath their feet formed a calming cadence. Despite the danger behind them, their movements were deliberate, controlled, unified. Fritigern rode near the front, scanning the horizon. His eyes lingered on distant shapes, hills rising like ancient guardians, clusters of trees swaying gently, the faint outlines of Roman watchtowers far beyond their path. His mind balanced hope and caution, grounding him with each breath. They passed by an old Roman villa long abandoned. Its walls stood cracked and silent, vines curling across faded mosaics. The tribe moved through it quietly, respecting the echoes of the lives once lived there. Children touched the stone walls, marveling at carvings half erased by time. Elders spoke softly of how empire rose and fell, how even Rome, great as it was, could not escape the slow unraveling of time. The abandoned villa reminded the Visigoths how fragile human systems were, how even the powerful could crumble. It brought a strange kind of comfort, that even though they walked through danger, they were part of a larger story, a world changing, shifting, moving to be why midday they climbed a hill where the wind carried a hint of distant rain. The scent was crisp, refreshing. When they reached the top, the land stretched out in a breathtaking panorama. Fields rolled endlessly below, dotted with patches of forest and streams that glimmered faintly in the sun. The sky opened wide above them, an expanse of pale blue that soothed tired minds. They paused there, taking in the view. Some warriors closed their eyes, allowing the wind to brush over them like a quiet blessing. Mothers held children close, pointing out birds gliding across the sky. For a short moment, the world felt peaceful, untouched by Rome, untouched by fear, untouched by the chaos transforming the world beyond the horizon. But the scouts soon returned with urgent news. Roman forces had accelerated their march. Not a charge, not an immediate threat, but a tightening circle. They were no longer lingering behind hills or hiding their movement. They marched openly, fully visible on a distant ridge. Their red cloaks rippled in the wind. Their armor glinted sharply. Their formation was unmistakably purposeful. The Visigoths watched from afar. The sight was imposing, almost cinematic, lines of disciplined soldiers forming neat blocks, moving with the precision of a machine. A child asked softly, "Are they coming for us?" A mother answered just as softly, "Not yet." Fritigern stood still, studying the scene. He did not look afraid, only contemplative. He knew what the Romans intended. They wanted the Visigoths to feel the pressure. They wanted to shape the battlefield. But the Visigoths still had movement, still had choice, still had the open land ahead. "We move," Fritigern said quietly. "We keep distance, but not fear." The caravan descended the hill and entered a stretch of land where low shrubs brushed against their legs. The wind carried sounds differently here, muffled, softened. It felt like walking through a gentle haze, each step blending into the next. Even as the afternoon stretched on, exhaustion did not break them. Their unity held them together. Their purpose carried them. Their quiet resolve kept every step grounded. Near evening, clouds thickened overhead, dimming the sky with soft gray light. A gentle rain began to fall. Not harsh, not cold, but light and soothing. Droplets tapped softly against cloaks and hair, beating on wagon covers, darkening the earth beneath their feet. Children tilted their heads, letting the cool drops touch their foreheads. The smell of fresh rain brought a calming presence across the caravan. They found shelter beneath a group of large trees, their branches wide enough to protect most of the camp. Fires were lit carefully, tended with patience until they steadied. The rain softened into mist, drifting through the camp in thin, quiet veils. Families gathered close, sharing warmth beneath blankets. Warriors sat near the edges, rain shimmering on their helmets and hair as they kept watch. Their eyes scanned the horizon, but the Romans did not appear. Even they would slow in the rain. Fritigern walked slowly through the camp, checking on each small group. He offered smiles, soft words, reassurance. When he reached the shelter of the largest tree, he paused and looked outward into the mist. The world felt blurred, quiet, almost dreamlike. He breathed deeply, letting the rain-soaked air fill his lungs, that he thought of the battle he knew was coming. Not today, not tonight, but soon. He thought of the Roman general who would lead it. He thought of the land where their two worlds would finally collide. He closed his eyes and whispered softly, "When the time comes, we will stand." The rain eased. The fires glowed brighter. The camp settled into a peaceful hush. Children slept with their heads on their parents' laps. Elders rested their eyes, warmed by the fire. Warriors listened to the soft patter of droplets falling from leaves. The night wrapped itself around the Visigoths gently, as though shielding them from what awaited tomorrow would bring new miles, new decisions, new tension. But tonight, the world allowed them to rest. The rain faded slowly during the night, softening into a gentle mist that hung in the air like a delicate veil. By the time dawn stirred, the world felt washed clean, quiet, cool, and deeply calm. Drops of water clung to the branches of the trees beneath which the Visigoths had taken shelter, glistening like small pearls in the newborn light. A faint breeze carried the scent of wet earth and fresh leaves, a soothing reminder that nature still offered comfort even in times of uncertainty. People woke gradually, their movements unhurried. Some stretched beneath blankets still warm from the night's fires. Mothers brushed damp strands of hair from their children's faces, whispering soft good mornings. Warriors rose more slowly than usual, letting the cool air ease the tension in their muscles. The rain had brought a kind of softness to the world that the tribe embraced silently. Fritigern stood near the edge of the camp, his cloak heavy with morning dew. He breathed in deeply, letting the freshness of the air settle into him. The early light softened the lines of worry around his eyes, giving him a momentary peace he rarely allowed himself to feel. He watched as people gathered water from the puddles and springs, as they prepared small meals, as they spoke quietly about the night's rain. For a short while, the threat of Rome seemed far away, but not forgotten. The scouts arrived quietly, as they always did. Their faces were calm, but their eyes carried the weight of what they had seen. One stepped forward, bowing his head before speaking. "The Romans slowed during the rain," he said gently. "Their cavalry halted for shelter. Their infantry made camp behind the ridge." Another added, "The rain hid our trails for a time. They will need the morning to reorganize before they follow again." Fritigern nodded slowly, absorbing the information with quiet thoughtfulness. The rain had given them a small gift, time. Fragile, temporary, but precious. "Then we used this morning wisely," he said. His voice was soft, but it carried steady through the cool air. Breakfast was brief but calmer than usual. People ate warm grains softened by rainwater, shared with quiet gratitude. Children played near the trees, splashing in small puddles left behind by the storm. Their laughter echoed gently, blending with the dripping leaves and giving the camp a fragile lightness. When the tribe began moving again, they did so at a steady pace. The rain had softened the earth beneath their feet, muffling the sound of their march. Mist hovered low across the ground, drifting around legs and hooves like a soft garment trailing behind them. The landscape felt dreamlike, muted, gentle, wrapped in silence as they walked through the mist-covered fields. Fritigern moved among his people, offering reassurance with quiet words and steady glances. He knew they felt the tension tightening again now that the rain had passed. He could sense the unspoken worry in the way warriors scanned the horizon, in the way mothers held their children just a bit closer. The Romans would march again soon. But for now, the land remained peaceful to be midday. The mist had lifted, revealing a large stretch of open countryside dotted with scattered shrubs and distant groves. The sun emerged slowly from behind soft clouds, warming the earth and bringing a gentle brightness to the world. The tribe paused beside a small rise to rest, allowing the warmth to seep into their bones after the coolness of the morning. Fritigern climbed the rise with a few warriors, looking across the land ahead. The view stretched far, rolling hills, a thin ribbon of river, and beyond that, the faint outline of distant mountains. It felt like a crossroads between worlds. Behind them, the weight of Roman power. Ahead, the uncertain path toward freedom. As he looked, he felt a tightening in his chest, not of fear, but of understanding. The Romans were drawing nearer with discipline and intent. Soon, this silent journey would be broken by the clash Rome had been preparing for. Yet Fritigern felt no panic. Instead, he felt a calm resolve. His people had walked too far, suffered too much, grown too strong in spirit to crumble now. He descended from the rise and returned to the tribe, who were gathering for their afternoon march. The caravan resumed movement, weaving through tall grass that swayed softly in the breeze. Shadows stretched long and narrow as the sun continued its journey across the sky. In the afternoon, they passed through a grove of old trees, gnarled, sprawling, ancient. The branches arched overhead like the protective arms of a massive elder spirit. The sound of rustling leaves was soothing, like a whispered lullaby. Some of the children walked with hands outstretched, brushing their fingers along the rough bark as though greeting an old friend. The elders spoke softly of their ancestors, imagining how similar groves might have looked in lands far behind them. As the tribe emerged from the grove, scouts returned again, this time with a sharper note in their steps. "The Romans are moving faster," one said. "Their cavalry has crossed the ridge." Fritigern remained calm. "How far?" "Half a day behind." He nodded, thinking. "Enough distance. We continue." They moved through the late afternoon light, the sky above turning a deeper shade of gold. The land felt quiet, but not empty. There was an energy beneath the surface, a sense of shifting, of anticipation, as if the world itself were preparing for the meeting of two great forces. By evening, the tribe reached a broad meadow nestled between rising hills. The grass was soft and deep, perfect for resting. A small stream wound lazily along the edge. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of peach and amber, gradually deepening into lavender as night approached. The Visigoths set up camp with a familiar rhythm. Fires were lit, their warm glow spreading gently across the meadow. Families gathered to share food, their voices low and melodic in the twilight. Mothers braided their children's hair. Warriors cleaned their weapons with slow, methodical motions that felt more like meditation than preparation. Fritigern moved among them, sensing the mixture of calm and unspoken readiness. He paused beside one of the fires, watching the flames dance quietly. The warmth touched his face, contrasting with the cool evening air. He listened to the soft murmurs around him, each voice blending into the peaceful night. Later, as stars began to appear, one by one, then many, the camp quieted into gentle stillness. The moon rose low on the horizon, casting a silver sheen across the meadow. The soft wind brushed through the grass with a whisper. Fritigern climbed one of the surrounding hills, standing alone beneath the sky. He gazed back along the path they had traveled. He could not see the Romans in the darkness, but he could feel their presence, a steady, approaching force. He breathed deeply, letting the cool night air seep into him. He thought of the battle he knew was coming. He thought of the weight of history pressing toward this point. Yet in that moment, he felt no fear, only clarity, only resolve, only the steady rhythm of his own heartbeat that he whispered, almost to the wind, "We walk as one, and we will not break." Below him, the tribe slept, peacefully, deeply, wrapped in the softness of the night. Tomorrow, they would rise. Tomorrow, they would march. Tomorrow, destiny would draw even nearer. The stars lingered in the sky long after the first faint hints of dawn began to soften the darkness. The Visigoth camp remained quiet, wrapped in a blanket of gentle stillness as the fires dimmed into glowing embers. A whisper of cool morning air brushed across the meadow, carrying with it the scent of grass and the crisp promise of another long journey. Far above, the last traces of the moon shone with a pale, comforting glow. People stirred slowly. Some stretched carefully beneath their woolen blankets, reluctant to leave the warmth. Children shifted sleepily, curling closer to their mothers before finally blinking open their tired eyes. Warriors rose with deliberate calm, moving with slow breaths so as not to disturb the delicate quiet of morning. The peacefulness was almost tender, a moment suspended between past struggle and the future still approaching. Fritigern stood near the center of the camp, his cloak wrapped around him as he looked out across his resting people. The night had brought clarity, but morning brought the weight of responsibility back onto his shoulders. Even so, his expression remained steady. He stepped between the small clusters of families, offering quiet greetings and reassuring smiles. His presence alone seemed to bring ease, reminding everyone that they did not face the journey alone. The fires were rekindled gently. Water warmed in small pots, steaming softly in the cool air. Bread was passed around, warmed near the flames so that its comforting scent filled the camp. Mothers fed their children small bites, whispering soft encouragements. The sound of gentle voices drifted through the air like a calming melody. By the time the sun crested the horizon, the morning mist had begun to gather across the meadow. The world took on a soft, hazy glow, as though wrapped in a veil of quiet serenity. The light shimmered across the grass, each blade glistening with dew. It was a peaceful beginning to a day that would demand strength. The scouts were the first to break the softness of morning. Their approach was quiet but purposeful. They bowed their heads respectfully before speaking, their voices low enough not to disturb the calm atmosphere. "The Romans broke camp early," one said softly. "Their infantry is moving in formation again. They intend to close distance before nightfall." Another added, "Their cavalry is scouting far ahead. They move with discipline. They mean to pressure us, but not strike yet." Fritigern listened without visible concern. He knew what the Romans were doing. They wanted to keep the Visigoths within reach, close enough to control, far enough not to provoke chaos. A careful, calculated tightening. "We continue," he replied gently, "but we remain steady. The land still offers us space." The caravan began its march once more, leaving behind the meadow with its soft grass and lingering mist. The Visigoths moved at a calm, measured pace through the early morning light. A sense of unity flowed between them, as though each step was shared among thousands of hearts beating together. The soft rhythm of their movement, boots against damp earth, wagon wheels turning, formed a soothing, almost meditative cadence as they traveled. The land around them shifted into rolling hills, each rise and fall creating a gentle sway in their path. The wind whispered through the tall grass, brushing softly against their legs. Birds glided above, their wings cutting graceful arcs across the sky. The landscape seemed to breathe with them, exhaling calmness into their weary spirits. Children pointed excitedly when they spotted a herd of deer grazing quietly on a distant slope. The deer lifted their heads, ears flicking, but they did not flee. Instead, they watched the passing Visigoths with quiet curiosity before returning to their morning meal. The sight brought a hush of wonder over the caravan, a small but welcome reminder that peace still existed in the world. By midday, the sun warmed the earth fully, drying the remnants of the night rain. The tribe paused on a hillside that overlooked a sparkling river winding gently through the valley below. The water shimmered with bright reflections, moving with slow, soothing currents. People refilled their flasks, splashed cool water on their faces, and allowed themselves a few restful breaths as they rested. Fritigern walked the length of the hillside, observing the land with patient eyes. He saw the distant forests, the winding river, the slope of the hills, all the elements of a landscape that could give his people a slight advantage when the inevitable confrontation approached. He noted where the ground dipped sharply, where the trees grew dense, where the earth would be firm or soft beneath marching feet. He was not anxious. He was preparing. Quietly, calmly did I end the afternoon. Clouds drifted lazily across the sky, casting large patches of shade that moved over the land like giant shadows. The caravan passed through a series of small valleys echoing with the distant songs of birds. The sound carried softly on the breeze, blending with the footsteps of the Visigoths, creating an unexpectedly peaceful harmony. Elders recounted old stories to the younger ones as they walked, tales of their ancestors, of courage and exile, of the great migrations before them. Their voices were calm and steady, grounding the children, reminding them that their people had survived countless hardships long before the Romans sought to confine them. By late afternoon, the tribe reached the foot of a long hill. The ascent was slow but steady, and when they reached the top, they found themselves greeted by an expansive view of the valley below. It stretched endlessly, fields, rivers, distant groves glowing beneath the soft sunlight. It was beautiful enough to still their breath for a moment. But beauty was not the only thing visible. Along the far ridge, tiny red dots of Roman cloaks flickered like small embers carried on the wind. Their formation was unmistakable. The Romans had kept their pace. Their presence was quiet but heavy, a reminder that the time of choosing was drawing closer. The Visigoths stood silently on the hilltop, taking in both the beauty and the looming shadow of their pursuers. Nobody panicked. Instead, a solemn, gentle calm fell over them. They understood what lay ahead, but they faced it together. The caravan descended the hill and made camp near a line of low trees. Fires were lit carefully, their glow soft and steady. The sky deepened from warm gold to a serene lavender, then to a deep blue as evening settled around them like a comforting blanket. Children drifted to sleep early, tired from the day's long march. Mothers hummed soft songs, their voices blending with the crackling of the fire. Warriors sat in quiet circles, polishing their weapons not with urgency but with ritual calm. These moments mattered, moments of grounding, of breath, of stillness before the storm. Fritigern sat alone for a while, listening to the soft murmur of night sounds, the faint hum of insects, the distant call of an owl, the crackle of wood, the steady breathing of his people resting around him. He let these sounds sink into him, steadying the weight he carried. He knew the Romans were preparing. He knew the battle would come soon. Yet sitting there beneath the deepening night sky, he felt a profound sense of clarity. His people had endured exile, hunger, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of empire. They had walked across vast lands with nothing but hope and determination. They had not broken. They would not break now. He looked toward the horizon where darkness swallowed the ridgeline and whispered to the night, "We walk together, and together we will stand." One by one, the fires burned low. The camp settled into peaceful silence. The night wrapped itself around the sleeping Visigoths, holding them in a gentle embrace. The stars shimmered overhead like distant guardians, watching quietly. Tomorrow would come, and with it, the next step toward destiny. The final night before destiny settled over the Visigoth camp like a soft, heavy blanket. The fires glowed steadily, casting warm halos of light across the quiet meadow. A gentle breeze drifted through the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and cool earth. The sky stretched wide above them, deep and endless, dotted with stars that shimmered like tiny lanterns hanging in the vast darkness. It was a peaceful night, deceptively calm, as if the world itself wished to give them one last moment of rest before all things changed. Fritigern walked among his resting people with slow, measured steps. He paused to check on elders wrapped in blankets near the fires, on children sleeping with their heads on their mothers' laps, on warriors preparing quietly for the morning ahead. His presence brought a sense of reassurance, a reminder that even in the face of great uncertainty, they were not alone. There was a silent understanding among them all, a shared breath, a shared heartbeat, a shared fate. The scouts returned late into the night, their approach quiet, almost hesitant. Their shadows flickered across the firelight as they stepped forward. One of them spoke softly, careful not to disturb the peaceful atmosphere more than necessary. "The Romans have made camp across the valley," he said. "Their fires are many, but dim. They are preparing." Another added, "They are waiting for dawn." A soft hush settled over the listeners. It was not fear, just acceptance. The long journey had been moving toward this point for months, perhaps for years. The coming confrontation felt inevitable now, like the closing of a circle that had begun long before any of them were born. Fritigern thanked the scouts and let the knowledge settle deep within him. There was no anxiety in his expression, only calm resolve. His people had endured exile, hunger, betrayal, loss, and the weight of empire pressing relentlessly behind them. Tomorrow would not be the beginning of their struggle. It would be the culmination of it. He walked to a quiet place just beyond the glow of the fires, where the grass bent gently in the wind. Sitting beneath the night sky, he closed his eyes and breathed deeply. The cool air held the scent of the coming dawn, a subtle reminder that time moved forward no matter how tightly one held onto the night as he sat there. He thought of the generations that had come before, the ancestors who had crossed distant lands, survived countless hardships, kept their stories alive through centuries of change. He thought of the future generations who would one day speak of this moment, this migration, this stand against an empire. He felt their presence around him, as if the past and future alike leaned close in the quiet darkness. When he returned to camp, most of the tribe had fallen asleep, wrapped in the soft hum of night. The fires burned low but steady. The wind whispered through the trees. A deep, calming stillness hung in the air, as if the world wished to cradle them gently before the storm. Morning came softly, almost reluctantly. The first light crept over the hills in pale shades of gold and rose, illuminating the meadow in a serene glow. The tribe woke slowly, stretching in the cool air, their breath visible in faint clouds. There was no panic, no rush, only quiet readiness. Mothers dressed their children calmly, brushing stray hairs from their faces. Elders sat near the fires, warming their hands, whispering gentle blessings. Warriors moved with slow assurance, checking their shields and spears, tightening straps with practiced motions. Their movements were measured, almost ritualistic. It was not preparation for violence. It was preparation for protection, for survival, for the continuation of their people. Fritigern stood before them, the morning light soft on his face. He looked over each family, each warrior, each child. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried through the cool air with steady strength. "Today," he said, "we do not stand for conquest. We do not stand for glory. We stand so our children may walk freely. We stand so our people may breathe without fear. We stand not as warriors alone, but as a nation. There was no shout in response. Noror, only a deep, shared breath that swept through the tribe like a single unified exhale. Their strength was quiet, their courage silent, their resolve unshakable. They moved into position near the edge of the valley, the rising sun casting long shadows across the landscape. Dew sparkled on the grass beneath their feet. The earth felt cool and solid, grounding them. The morning wind carried the faint, distant sound of Roman horns, soft but unmistakable. The Romans appeared slowly over the ridge, their formation tightening with disciplined precision. Their armor caught the sunlight, glinting in rhythmic flashes. They moved in perfect lines, a display of imperial order and strength. The Visigoths did not flinch. They stood together in calm determination, families behind the warriors, elders at their center. Children held their mothers' hands. The wind brushed through their hair, carrying with it the soft hum of the world waking around them. The two forces approached one another with a slow inevitability. The air grew thick with anticipation, yet the world remained strangely peaceful. Birds still called from the trees. The river murmured softly in the distance. The sun warmed the fields in gentle waves that end that moment. Time seemed to balance on a fragile edge, caught between what had been and what was about to begin. What happened next would be remembered for centuries. Not for the clash itself, but for what it represented, a people standing together, a nation being born, a moment when resolve outweighed fear and unity outweighed empire. The Visigoths took one last breath as the day fully broke, golden light spreading across the valley like a blessing, and in that calm, glowing dawn, their destiny began.